Hello everybody and welcome. In today's video, I'd like to show you everything that I made this fall season. And to be honest, I don't have a whole lot to show you because sewing wise, I only made 4 projects and I think I had about 15 planned, but it is now the beginning of December and I have accepted that that is all that I got done this season, and then it's now time to move on to other projects for the winter season or for the holiday season, and then it's okay, it's okay. I went through a season that was pretty complicated, both tough and rewarding at the same time. Tough in that I was going through a medical treatment that manipulated my hormones quite a lot and is still doing so a bit. And I knew it was going to be complicated, but I didn't anticipate the intensity of the physical fatigue, and especially I didn't anticipate the mental fatigue. So I experienced for 2 to 3 weeks a sort of mental fog where I was unable to focus on any kind of long-term objective or projects that required a lot of decision making or problem solving, such as sewing projects or working on videos for this channel. And that was tough because I felt like, but I want to do these things and I can't. And then also in the fall season, I experience every year a sort of nesting period. I think it's especially in October when it starts to get cooler, it starts to get rainier, the leaves are changing and it smells crisp. I just want to make my home comfortable, and so I ended up doing a lot more research for new furniture, new household items that will make our lives easier, me and my husband, I mean, and just, yeah, I go through a homemaking sort of phase every October. And I did a lot of homemaking, putting up shelves, changing sheets, reorganizing the kitchen, and then planting tulips, for example, and all kinds of spring bulbs. And this is the very first time that I've done that. And so I'm excited to be able to garden a bit more. My goal is to have a 4-season garden. So we'll see. That takes quite a lot of time. I'm still learning all kinds of things, such as plant names, what's normal, what's not normal, fertilizer. And so I did want to ask you, is it normal that they're already starting to sprout? I don't know. But yeah, there was that. I also did a bunch of crafting that was not related to sewing, such as I love the colors of autumn leaves, and so I pressed a bunch of them and I have them now, and I'm not sure what I'm going to do with them, but they're beautiful. Or we live close to a farm where we can go picking for fruits and veggies, and then also flowers. They have a large amount of flowers, different kinds for different seasons, and especially in the fall they have both statice and straw flowers, and so I was able to pick those myself and then hang them up and dry them, which is what you see behind me here. And then I didn't have time to make anything with them. I was going to make a wreath, a fall wreath out of dried flowers, but I haven't gotten to it yet, so I'll probably put these away for a little while and then maybe create little bouquets for the winter time later, but I did that and that made me happy. So I was doing all kinds of things, it's just not so much long-term or creative or problem-solving projects. And so I figured this video, I do have 4 sewing projects to show you, 1 knitting work in progress, an embroidery project that I finished, and then I attended a workshop on a traditional Japanese craft of fabric folding to create different geometrical objects, and so I'll show you that in more detail in a moment. But I have those to show you, and then I figured because this video is going to be a little bit shorter, if this interests you, I thought that I would share with you things that I loved this season. So recipes, tea, and books that I absolutely loved this season. So if that interests you, I'll include that in the end. But without further ado, let me get to the 4 sewing projects I got to this season. So the first project that I worked on, and which took most of the fall season, was actually a commission project that I took on for a friend. And this is something that I almost never do, and it reminded me why. I'm very happy I was able to make this project for this friend, but it took a lot of time. And it was a Simplicity 8699 skirt in a wool fabric that was a remnant from another project that I'd made. I bought this fabric at Mister Tissu about 3 or 4 years ago, and it's sort of a beige, slightly orange and brown check fabric, and it's mostly wool, I think a little bit of polyester and viscose as well in a blend. And I had originally used this fabric to create a Silverit Ultimate Pencil skirt that I hacked into a mini skirt a few years ago, and I love that skirt, But this fabric is a little bit too warm in tone for me, and I wasn't going to make another skirt because I wanted to keep it away from my face, for example, because it's not exactly my colors. And so I still had 2 meters of it sitting around, and I was going to either resell it or donate it one day when I had the time to do so. And so when she contacted me and sent me a screenshot of the skirt that I had made, the 8699 Simplicity skirt that I made last year, and said, "I want that. How much do you want me to pay you for it to make it for me?" And I proposed this fabric that I had left over that I had no use for, and she validated it. It made it a lot easier for me because it didn't require so much decision making on my part and so much work and research, because that's a big bulk of the amount of work that goes into a project is the research. The pattern, the sizing, and the fabric. And that's why I make videos showing you what I'm going to make with my fabrics or patterns, because it helps take some of the guesswork out. Anyway, that's a tangent. So I was happy to make it for her. I took her measurements and I made up a mock-up version, or not a mock-up. I sewed the fabric together, I basted it together at the side seams, and then took it to her to try on once the waistband and the side seams were connected, so that she could sort of see, even if it was still kind of bulky at the waist band because I hadn't trimmed anything, she could sort of try it on and see if it fit. And it turned out that it was too big. So a lot of Big 4 patterns do size bigger, or they include a little bit more ease in their patterns, so that didn't surprise me. And so we decided to take it in 4 centimeters at both the waist and the hips. And then we also determined the length that she wanted. Oh, and then making this for her also sort of exercised my pattern modification skills, because her body is obviously different from mine. Everybody has different morphologies. And so the pattern adjustments that I applied to her version of the skirt, for example, her hips are smaller, or a smaller size than her waist, which is the opposite of the alterations that I have to do because my hips are bigger than my waists in standard sizing. So it was interesting to learn to grade for an entirely different body shape so it would fit her correctly, which was my #1 priority. The main reason that this was really complicated is that I realized that when I'm sewing clothes for myself, I try it on all the time, because the whole purpose of making my own clothes is that it'll fit me. And so I wanted it to fit her. I'll stop repeating that, but that was my main objective. And so taking the time to go to her place and have her try it on and get fit feedback so that it would fit correctly, I think, so we met a first time so that I could take her measurements and pick out the buttons together and validate the fabric, and then a second time for her to validate the fit, and that's where we determined that there was a little bit too much ease in the waist and the hips. And then I modified that seam, sewed up the entire skirt, delivered it to her, and it turns out it was too tight then. And so it was fine at the waist, but too tight at the hips. So I took it back, I unsewed or unpicked a whole lot of work, rematched up the check at the side seams, because also this wool fabric was checked. So there was all kinds of pattern matching to do, and that's what took, I think, the majority of my time is making sure that all of the checks matched up along all of the seams possible. First we took it in 4 centimeters, and then I let it out 3 centimeters total on either side seam, which meant that I was sort of curving from the waist outwards, so redrawing that line. So that line, or that skirt, the shape of it is completely different from the side seams of the pattern now, completely custom to her body. And I added a lining to her version, just like I had my version, even though that's not included in the pattern instructions or in the pattern at all. And I added a lot of hand sewing to finish it because it's such a beautiful fabric. And so, for example, I pressed the inside seams, the side seams open, and then hand stitched them very carefully to the main fabric without going through the fabric with a, I think it's called a whip stitch. I'll put that below, the name of that. And then same for the hem, so that it would be invisible but well fixed on the inside. And then I added French seams to the lining side seams and sewed it that way, and so that it would wear better and not unravel on the inside. And then also along the facing, where the lining was attached to the facing, I added a pick stitch to sew it down instead of understitching or edge stitching, to keep it smoothly folded in the same direction as the facing towards the inside. And so yeah, there were little details like that that just meant that it took a lot of time. I also decided to, after making my version, where the waistband was pretty thick because it had 2 layers of a pretty thick wool, I added a facing of, I think it was a cotton twill, a black cotton twill, so that she had something that was still reinforced with interfacing and would still have the structure for the waistband to hold up that sort of bouncier wool, but have it be less thick so that the waistband wasn't too thick. It's still a little bit thick because it's still 4 layers of fabric crossing one over the other, but yeah, not as thick. And so yeah, I was able to deliver it the end of November, so it did take the entire autumn season to make, but now she has a skirt that fits her well. I did spend about 45 hours making it because it takes a lot more time when you have to go meet that person for the fitting sessions and then take it back and unpick it and all that. So I will keep that in mind for any future projects that I accept on commission, because I know that she's really excited about it and she would like more projects, for example. She's already thinking about the next thing she'd like to ask. And it's really hard for me to balance this because it's such a pleasure to be able to make custom clothes for my friends and family, but it does take a lot of time and it is a lot of work. And so yeah, I'll just have to keep that in mind for next time. But I'm very happy that she has this skirt now that fits her well and goes with her coloring, and that she'll be able to wear for many years to come because it is beautiful fabric that will last over time. And yeah, I'm proud of that project, no matter how much time it took. The second project that I worked on this fall was another pair of these Seamwork Joss Pants. So I made a first version of these pants in a really beautiful bluish green linen this summer, and I created a whole sewing vlog on that if you would like to see the creation or the sewing of that project from beginning to end. And so I'll link that if you'd like to watch that. But I know that this pattern is really versatile and you can make it in all different kinds of fabrics. So from really slinky, drapey fabrics such as viscose or silk to stiffer fabrics such as linen or probably even wool, I thought. So I had this wool that the same friend that I made the previous project for, she went fabric shopping with me one day and she picked out this fabric and I was like, oh, that's gorgeous. She has a very good eye for style and fashion. And I found a second cut of the same fabric, luckily, and was able to purchase it. I bought 3 meters for 40 euros, and it is 100% wool, and I bought it at Sacré Coupon, which is one of my favorite fabric shops in Paris. And if you'd like, I have a whole video on my favorite fabric shops in Paris, if you're curious to know which ones they are, or if you're coming to Paris to visit and you'd like to go fabric shopping soon. But yeah, this wool is a very light, drapey wool. It's not stiff or heavy enough for coats or blazers. I suppose you could make a blazer with it if you interfaced it to add more structure, but I figured it's perfect because it's both wool, but it's also pretty drapey and it'll move and correspond well to the sort of wide leg, drapier aspect of this pattern, and I was right. I'm really happy with the way that this turned out. I made the same size as the original linen version that I made, so a size 0 at the waist graded to a size 2 at the hips, and then the same size 2 all the way down to the hem, and it turned out really well. I originally cut this out and was planning on making it as something easy to do as I was working on the skirt for my friend, but it turns out I did actually want to match up the checks of this fabric. I figured at first I'll just cut it. The checks are so tiny, nobody's going to notice if they're not matched up at the seams. And then I took a small piece of the fabric and sewed it just randomly, and I was like, oh, but I notice. I know. So usually when I'm sewing with check fabric or striped fabric and I want the stripes of the check to match up, I will mark on the pattern pieces with a pencil, something that I can erase later, where the stripes are, so that when I cut the second version or the back part of the pants or the skirt or whatever, I can make sure it's lined up correctly. So I didn't quite do that because the stripes or the checks weren't exactly straight. I cut it out, sort of hoping for the best and matching up as much as possible. And because these checks are less than a centimeter apart, I was able to sort of fiddle with it. Since wool is not too stiff and a little bit malleable, I was able to sort of make them line up at the side seams and at the seams where it would be very visible. But it did take a lot of time, so it was not at all the relaxing project that I thought it would be. But I'm really happy with the way it turned out. It is really comfortable to wear, and I have been wearing it almost nonstop since I finished making them. They are wide-legged enough for me to wear thermal leggings underneath. I usually wear them with wool thermal leggings because I am perpetually cold as soon as the autumn starts. And it fits just fine over them, and even though it's 100% wool and my thermal leggings are too, they don't stick together, or yeah, there's no static cling, it's not itchy, or yeah, it's fine. It drapes just fine, and I love it, especially because of the hormonal treatment I was going through. My abdomen was really sore and sort of bloated, so I love that it's a high-waisted fit, and so I could just sort of pass the elastic waistband up to my natural waist, and there was nothing pressing against my belly, and that was lovely. And so I lived in those pants, or I have been living in those pants since I made them. So yeah, I'm really happy with the way they turned out. I love this fabric. It's sort of a cooler toned brown and taupe, and a little bit of gray, I think. Check. I'll be keeping an eye out for similarly weighted and drapier wool fabrics like this one, because it worked really well in this project, and I'm really happy with it. The third project that I worked on was this project. It's the Seamwork Fig Cardigan that I made in this mostly viscose blend double knit fabric from Stuff Emer or Tissu Emer, depending on where you connect. They're a German fabric shop, and I typically buy online, and they have a French version of their shop. That's why I say Tissu Emer. You'll find all the details of this project in that video that I made, so I won't go into too much detail here, but I am really, really pleased with how this turned out, and it's super comfy in this fabric. I'll link this fabric below too if you'd like, because it still exists in stock, and there are multiple colorways of it as well. And it is one of my favorite double knit fabrics because not only is it made up of mostly viscose fibers, which makes it super soft, easy to wash, easy to wear, not scratchy, and especially a lot of double knit fabrics are made in polyester, and polyester is, you know, plastic. It holds odors, it doesn't let your skin breathe, and viscose does. And so I much prefer wearing viscose, especially in the wintertime when I'm craving more stretch fabrics, sweaters, fabrics that will hug my body but not smell after an hour or two. So that's why I love this fabric, and I have made multiple projects in it. And I especially love this light taupe color. I think there's a slight sort of pinky or purplish tone to it, because when I was picking out buttons, I went to my favorite haberdashery in Paris called the Mercerie de Charonne, which is in the 11th arrondissement, and the owner of the shop is really helpful when it comes to picking out threads and buttons to match projects, and she suggested these vintage buttons with 2 holes rather than 4, which I absolutely love. I think they're really elegant, and they're a little bit more of a brownish maroon color, and they go really well with this fabric. And so I think there's sort of a pinky or purple or maroon undertone to it. It's hard to explain. I'm not that color fluent, but I have noticed that it doesn't match up very well with the brown Seamwork Joss Pants that I made, for example. It's a little bit purpley, and so maybe I need to make a dark plum pair of Seamwork Joss Pants to go with them, or with this top. But yeah, I'm really happy with the way it turned out. I think the sizing is really nice. I made a size 00 at the bust, graded to a size 0 at the waist, and you can see how I altered the pattern in that video as well that I made, and the fit is perfect. I think that the sleeves are a little bit tight. They are meant to be fitted, they're designed that way, so that's not a fault of the pattern, but I do sometimes like to wear it over a thermal top just for extra warmth, and I find that even that with really thin sleeves, it's a little bit tight. And this fabric is really stretchy. This has an 80 to 100% stretch to it, so it's something to keep in mind when you're picking out fabric for this project. But I love the shape of this. I love the crew neck. I've been wearing it more buttoned up rather than open, but I can open it if I want to manipulate the shape and silhouette of my outfit. And yeah, I just think the crew neck is really lovely. I love the fit. It's fitted without being too tight. It doesn't squeeze me, and it has a really generous sort of lovely curve from the waist to the hips that doesn't also hug me at the hips. And so it's easy to tuck in, it's easy to wear out, it's just lovely. There was one other thing that I was thinking with this top that I might modify, and it is that you can see here it sort of gapes a little between the buttons, and I think that's normal with any kind of stretch project. You're gonna get some gaping around the bust at the button band. It does fit me, you know, it's just that the fabric has a tendency to want to stretch, you know, go back to its original shape and not stay stretched out. I could add tiny snaps here between the buttons at the button band. I've done that with woven fabric projects before, like the Sarin, Tilly and the Buttons Sarin dress. I have little tiny snaps that keep that closed between the buttons. But I think that because I might sometimes wear this, let me get this open without bothering the mic too much, one sec. Because I might sometimes wear it open, I thought maybe it'd be better just to leave it and accept the gaping a little bit, because I don't really want snaps showing when I wear it open sometimes. So yeah, I think think I'm just really happy with this project, how it turned out. And I just finished it a few days ago, but I've been wearing it quite a lot and I love it. If there's a bit more light, this video won't look so dark and sad. Anyway, my last sewing project was a second pair of Seamwork Joss Pants, and it's what I'm wearing now. It's very cozy, and it is in this thicker dark gray herringbone fabric. I purchased this at the fabric market in Roubaix that I went to about a month ago in the north of France, and I created a whole video on that too if you'd like to check that out. And I found this really beautiful dark gray herringbone fabric at the Tissu Papy stand, and I wanted to make these pants out of them. This one was a little bit more complicated. I didn't have to do any pattern matching, which was fantastic. So it did sew up much faster, but I found that this fabric is much bulkier. Even though I made the same size as my linen and woolen versions, I have a really hard time fitting it over my hips to get it on. And I think it's because the thickness of the fabric adds more bulk at the side seams, just everywhere, and it takes away a sort of essential amount of ease for that to go over my hips easily. I can still get it on just fine. I just have to sort of wiggle a little bit, and once it's over my hips, it fits absolutely perfect at my waist. But there is a little bit more bulk at the waistband elastic because that fabric doesn't gather as lightly and cleanly as my previous version. And then it is stiffer, so I can feel it rubbing when I walk a little bit more. It doesn't stick to my thermal tights either, so that's not a problem. But I do find that even though it's the same exact length as my previous versions, the stiffness sort of emphasizes that it's not entirely down to my ankles. And so I might let out the hem a little bit so that it's a little bit longer, because I think that it's a little bit less flattering, the length of it, in this fabric. But other than that, I love this project. This fabric is a little bit itchier than the previous one. It's not as soft, but because I wear leggings underneath, it's not directly against my skin and it's fine. And yeah, I have just finished this project a few days ago as well, and I've been wearing it a lot, especially with this fig cardigan, because I think that the dark gray goes fine with this light taupe. And even though this fabric is a little bit too thick, I think, and stiff for this pattern, it's just on the edge of too much. I am really happy with these wool versions, and I will be looking for more wool to make more wool Joss pants in the future. Moving on to embroidery, I am still following the traditional Japanese embroidery classes of Kogin-zashi that I started about a year ago, I think. There's about 4 of us in the class, and we meet in a cafe whenever we set the date. During the previous session, we set a date for the next time, and so it's whenever works for us and the professor. So it's sort of like a private class, and it's just a pleasure. And so the last class took place about a month ago, and we learned this pattern. It is the Tanu no Aze pattern, and I forget what that means translated, but I really love the geometric shape. And I picked a dark sort of burgundy red to make it in to go with the autumn season. And we have another session planned in a week? No, tomorrow. So I'm excited to continue. I think there are at least 5 or 6 more sessions and levels that we can, or patterns that we're going to learn. And so yeah, I just love the geometric shapes of Kogin-zashi. And as you can see, they're lines. It's usually 2 or 3 or 5 stitch lengths each one. And this is the back, if you want to see. Not as neat as the front, but still. And I'm learning all kinds of techniques for burying the ends of threads and things. But I love it. I love it, and it's really, I find, meditative, and I love learning new things such as embroidery. I hope that one day I'll be able to figure out how to use these patterns to embellish my sewing projects. But for now, I'm really happy just learning it and making these geometric shapes, and I'm excited to learn more. So in the beginning of November, I took part in another Japanese traditional craft class with the Espace Japon, which is in the 10th arrondissement, not far from the canal, for example. And it was a Tsumami Zaiku class, which is, so this is tiny pieces of fabric, let me cover my face, that are folded, and they create these shapes. And I didn't know that this was made out of fabric until I read the description of the course. And I thought it was just so cool because you use teeny tiny pieces of fabric, so teeny tiny squares of fabric, to make the petals. And they use this, or my teacher had these sort of pincers. How do you say? I have this tool, for example, that I purchased a while ago. it's kind of like this, but it's even thinner and more exact, like half the thickness of this and just really delicate. And so you use it to fold little squares into different shapes and then glue them to a base. And so I decided to make this hair decoration. I think that usually it's worn somewhere like here in the hair. I think you're supposed to have a like large amount of hair in the front here, so you can attach it this way. I think it's supposed to be around the ear. But yeah, it's really beautiful kimono, sort of either silk or cotton fabric that's used, and I kind of want to keep learning. I know that the professor, she does private classes out of her home in Versailles, and Versailles is a little bit far away. It's about 45 minutes from where I live, but I could get there with public transportation and learn some more. It's just so intricate and requires such attention to detail and teeny tiny little manipulations of fabric. But what a cool idea for tiny pieces of beautiful leftover fabric and different things that you can make with them, because I know she makes earrings and brooches and all kinds of things. Like, I probably won't wear this in my hair usually. Like, I don't think I'd have an occasion to, but I loved the design of these little, yeah, petals falling down. And I think it'd be interesting to learn it some more in case I can also embellish my sewing projects or reuse tiny scraps of beautiful fabric this way. And yeah, I'll also put up a few images of the art pieces that my teacher makes, because she also sells them on the Espace Japon online shop. And her creations are just absolutely beautiful and so precise and just gorgeous. I really want some too. I will link that shop below if you're interested in purchasing some of her creations. But yeah, I think I will perhaps this spring, perhaps not right away because I am doing a whole bunch of things at the moment and don't have a lot of time, but I would be interested in learning more of this technique and doing it some more. For knitting, I cast on and started knitting the Bergliebe sweater by Elizabeth Kramer that I mentioned in my fall plans video, and I have just finished doing the pattern at the yoke. Now I think it's going to be stockinette stitch until I break for the sleeves. And yeah, this was intricate and fun. There are a lot of twisted stitches that were difficult to do because a lot of the knitting was therefore very tight, but I just love the texture that adds. I'm obsessed with texture and knitting and creating texture, and so although twisted rib knit is not fun, I find. I don't really like rib knitting in general, but anyway, I'm excited to start on the body, even though I know it's not going to be as exciting as the patterned yoke. But I like that there's a repeated smaller version of this pattern at the hems of the sleeves and the hem of the body. And so yeah, it's not the last of the patterning that I'll be doing. This is the Ulysse de Rerum Natura yarn in the Poivre Sel colorway, because when I was making my Crayabea Kip sweater last year, I accidentally ordered this colorway rather than the Poivre Blanc colorway that I wanted, and the Poivre et Sel is so salt and pepper, that's this colorway, and what I really wanted is the white salt colorway, or white pepper colorway. But I think that even though my husband says that this looks like packaging twine, I do think that this taupe of my Seamwork sweater is nicer. But I don't think it's egregious. I think that it will be fine, and especially the pattern will make it really pretty. And I can always add embellishment or color by wearing a scarf over it, so it'll be more of a base garment in an outfit that just adds texture and visual interest while not being the main color for maybe. So it'll be more of a complementary piece, but I think it'll be a classic piece. I have faith in this piece, in this yarn, and it is a pleasure to knit, and the instructions are easy to follow, and there are linked YouTube videos to different techniques that I've never tried before. So yeah, I've had no problem with the instructions. I even got gauge immediately because I knit loose, and so I knew that it would probably be a good idea to size down a needle before I even start. So that's what I did to knit the gauge, and it was perfectly on gauge, which is the first time that's ever happened to me. So it's a sign that this project is going to go well. And so yeah, I'm excited to work on that. I think I might be able to finish it to at least for March. That'll be my deadline or my objective for this sweater, since yeah, a lot of my sweaters that I've knitted have taken me 6 to 9 months. So hopefully this will go faster. So those are all of the crafting projects that I worked on this season, and now I'd like to tell you the things that I loved this season, in case it gives you ideas for things to do or to read or to try. And if that interests you, stay with me. If not, thank you for watching, and I'll see you again soon. But the first thing I wanted to talk to you about is recipes. So I love baking, especially in the fall and holiday season. I host a Friendsgiving, usually a little bit before Thanksgiving, where I invite a bunch of friends that I want to share Thanksgiving with. Because I live in France, it's a tradition that I wanted to create to sort of keep the tradition going and then share it with friends that had never experienced it before, and it's now become a tradition between friends, and so that's lovely. But I do like to every year kind of try and up my game and try out new recipes, and this year I'm very happy with 2 recipes in particular, and that is pecan pie bars that I made because I love making dessert, but the food is so rich and we want to eat so much of it during the main course that a lot of people are too full for a big dessert or even a normal sized dessert after. So I like to make small sized desserts so people can try different desserts at the same time, like an assortment, then also don't feel sick to their stomach after. And so I do like pecan pie, especially when it's not too sweet. It's really hard to balance the sweet, I find. And I tried the Sally's Baking Addiction recipe for pecan pie bars, and it has a brown butter crust and then the pecan, and it's very, very much like a thick layer of pecans, which is just rich. And it's not too sugary. It is very buttery, but it's not too greasy. And it's just delicious. And I was able to cut them into really small squares so that everybody could try a little bit or take some home with them for the next day, for example. I always tell my guests to bring Tupperware to help us finish the leftovers, because otherwise we have way too much and it goes bad. And so everybody goes home with a Thanksgiving Tupperware. And yeah, that was delicious. So I'll link that recipe below if you'd like to try it too, maybe for next year. It was so good. Not too sugary, not too greasy, and I highly recommend that one. And then I also am very thankful that my cousin actually lives in Paris as well, and so we celebrate Thanksgiving with her as well. So I do 2 Thanksgivings a year. And I am lucky that she always offers to host because she absolutely loves cooking as well, and she has kids, so I think it's easier for her to organize that at home. So I get to be the guest to a Thanksgiving at the same time as hosting my Friendsgiving, which is a lot more relaxing. And I am known for my apple pie, typically, in family Thanksgivings. That's what I started making when I was a teenager, and that's what I contribute every year usually. And so I wanted to try a new recipe for apple pie as well, and it is the Claire Saffitz recipe that she published on YouTube about a month ago, and it is an apple cheddar pie. And I have never tried apple cheddar pies. It's not really a tradition that my family was into, but because I come from the northeast of the United States, and Vermont cheddar in particular, I'm very familiar with, I thought, that's an excellent idea. I love cheddar, and I think cheese and apples go together very well. And I knew that Claire Saffitz knows how to dose her recipes really well. I've never had a problem with her recipes being too sugary, too salty, etc. And so I wanted to try it, especially because in her YouTube video she walks you through all of the techniques, and I had a visual aid as to the techniques that I may not have ever tried before. For example, browning cream. I have never browned cream before, and that was interesting. And so yeah, that turned out really, really well. It was delicious. And I think next time I will try and find here in France a better quality cheddar, because the cheddar is in the crust. I did use just the cheddar that we found at the grocery store, but I think that I can't bring cheddar back from the United States because you can't bring cheese abroad. But perhaps I could find in like a British store, grocery store here, a good quality sharp cheddar that's been aged, and I'll have to try it again because it was just delicious. And I got to use apples that I picked myself. There were Braeburn apples at the farm where we go pick, especially fruits, veggies, and flowers. We were able to go apple picking, and so that was special too, to be able to make it with apples that I picked myself. So yeah, my fall season has been full of activities, just not so much sewing. And I highly recommend that recipe, so I will link that video below here if you'd like to check that out. The next thing I discovered this season was sobacha, which is a tea. It is a caffeine-free and taurine-free tea. It's an infusion more of torrefied buckwheat grains, and it's delicious. I think it's Japanese in origin, or at least it is very commonly consumed in Japan nowadays, and it's just so good. I have been trying to reduce the amount of caffeine that I drink in a day because it makes me anxious and I've been having sleeping problems, so I've been trying to not drink as much caffeine after noon so that I can fall asleep easier and stay asleep. But yeah, this is just delicious. I really like when teas are grilled, so I really love genmaicha as well, that Japanese green tea with the grilled rice as well. That's my favorite green tea. So if you have any other grilled teas or infusions that you'd like to recommend to me, I am open to recommendations. And I will link below where I buy that online here in France. But perhaps you'll be able to find it where you are as well, and I highly recommend it if you're looking for some kind of tisane or infusion to replace caffeine or taurine during the day when you want something hot to drink. And then lastly, during this season, I read 2 books that I wanted to talk about because I absolutely loved them. And these are 2 nonfiction books that I listened to. I listened to the audiobook versions. And the first one is Margaret Atwood's memoirs. At first I thought perhaps it wouldn't interest me so much because celebrity memoirs aren't really my thing, but Margaret Atwood is my favorite author of all time. I first discovered her when I was about 19 and I read her book, The Blind Assassin, and ever since, my life was changed. I have read almost all of her books and short story collections. Some I like more than others. The Blind Assassin is still my absolute #1 favorite. She's so interesting and well-read, and she knows so many interesting things. And I love her sarcastic, sort of sardonic tone. She's someone that I look up to quite a lot. I love her sense of analysis and her takes. So her speculative fiction, such as The Handmaid's Tale or Oryx and Crake, for example. I love Oryx and Crake. I highly recommend that book as well. Although it is kind of scary that she wrote that a while ago, especially The Handmaid's Tale, and now there are certain themes or subjects that are now reality. And yeah, I just love it. And so in this memoir, she talks about her life, her parents, her childhood, and she recalls such details and anecdotes that are just so funny or interesting. She's really funny. And I listen to it, she reads the audiobook aloud, and I just love her voice. It's sort of grainy and yeah, sardonic and Canadian in accent, so it was really lovely to hear her pronouncing the Canadian places that I wouldn't have pronounced the same way as an American, to hear the original and authentic names. Or to hear her experiences as a young woman trying to create a career as a writer, which is hard because it's not exactly financially viable for most people, and it requires a certain amount of independent thinking and independence in general, autonomy, especially because she was doing so during a time where women were not as accepted in society as individual autonomous people. Anyway, I won't go into that in so much detail, but I loved it. I didn't want it to end. It was a long audiobook. I think it was about 13 hours, and I didn't want it to end. I was really sad when it ended, so I might listen to it again. But it was so interesting. I highly recommend it. And then the second book that I listened to as an audiobook is called Economica. Let me go get I have a physical version. Let me go get that. Here it is. So this is Economica, A Global History of Women, Wealth, and Power by Dr. Victoria Bateman, who is a historian. She's an English author. And I first heard about this book from a podcast that I follow, also on Instagram, because this just published in September, and so it's new. And I listened to the audiobook, which is narrated by the author herself, and it was really interesting to hear her speak about it as well. But then I purchased the physical book because I want to reread it and annotate it because I found it fascinating. So basically, this is about throughout the ages, from the hunter-gatherer societies to more contemporary human societies, how women have always contributed meaningfully to the economy or to the economic organization of their societies, and either through work that was undervalued or unpaid, but essential, to paid or even financially impactful to markets directly as property owners or bankers, for example, merchants, or even pirates handling the flux of ships in a port in the 18th century. So yeah, it was fascinating, and there are so many interesting anecdotes about important women of history, how they lived, how they contributed to the economy, from everyday women who worked as potters or as weavers, because weaving fabric has been traditionally and from centuries, even thousands of years ago, a woman's profession. For example, in ancient Greece, it was very important for women of all levels of society to know how to weave and to weave, either for their families and for survival or for decoration. It was very important and part of culture. Or women in China weaving silk for the Silk Road trading that was going on. Silk was used as a money or as value against other trading things. Anyway, she explains it much better than I do. But it is so fascinating, and it covers not only North America and Europe, but also in equal parts Africa, the Middle East, and Asia, and different ages from hunter-gatherer societies to contemporary societies today. Very important women who did extraordinary things to contribute to economies, and how, no, women did not enter the workforce in the 70s. Women have always contributed to their societies in very important ways, and she also shows how the most robust and strongest economies have always integrated a diversity in their workforce, whether that be women or people of color or of other minorities that have been systematically repressed historically. And so yeah, it is fascinating, and I highly recommend reading this. If you can borrow it at your local library and listen to it like I did, you don't necessarily have to purchase the book at full price like I also did after reading it that way. It's not something that I learned in school when I was learning history as a teenager in high school, or even in university in history classes. Of course, it's important to learn about the men who advanced human society in different ways, politically, economically, but often women who contributed equally are not recognized or talked about, and this is sort of an emphasis of these people who are forgotten and who did contribute to the advancement of human society in a very important way. And so yeah, it makes me so excited. Please read this. It's so, so good, and I highly recommend it. So there you have it. Those are all of the sewing projects I worked on, embroidery, knitting, and fabric folding projects that I worked on, as well as the things that I loved this season that I highly recommend to you. Let me know if you have any recommendations, if you have any gardening recommendations for me, for example, or advice, what you made this season, or if you have any recipes or books that you would like to recommend to me as well. I would love to hear from you because I learn so much from you and get so many ideas. For example, gardening. One of you mentioned Sarah Raven's website and podcast, and that's how I got the idea to make these pots of tulip lasagnas. Thank you so much. That is such a valuable resource. And so yeah, I hope to hear from you. Don't hesitate, if this video was interesting or helpful for you, to like and subscribe so you don't miss any new videos from me. And if you would like to help sustain this channel, you can leave a tip via the YouTube Super Thanks button or via the Ko-fi account that I created that I will link in the description below. Any contribution is a huge help. Thank you for watching this video, and I hope you are all doing very well. I will see you again here soon with a new video. Take care, and bye-bye.